Have you ever heard of a military mission where they parachuted cats into a jungle? I know, it sounds completely made up, like something out of a cartoon, but it actually happened. This is the wild, true story of Operation Cat Drop, a tale that, believe it or not, starts with the best of intentions and ends with an airborne feline rescue mission.
And I'm not being poetic here. This is a direct quote from a Singaporean newspaper back in 1960. On the island of Borneo, it literally rained cats.
So, yeah. Why? That is the million-dollar question, right? Why on earth would the Royal Air Force go through all the trouble of dropping live cats out of a plane into a remote jungle? The answer, it turns out, is a fascinating lesson in how everything is connected.
All right, so let's get into the mission itself. And we're not talking about some tall tale or a local legend here. This was a real, officially planned military operation by the UK's Royal Air Force, and it was actually called Operation Cat Drop. The logistics of this were pretty remarkable. So on March 17, 1960, the RAF loaded 23 cats into special baskets. They were then dropped from this giant transport plane, along with 7,000 pounds of other supplies, from just 400 feet in the air. The reports at the time said the feline paratroopers landed bang in the middle of the zone. Unbelievable.
And here's the kicker. It actually worked. Just a month later, they got a message back saying, "Thanks for the cats, no more trouble with rats and mice." So the mission was a total success. But that just makes the whole thing even weirder, doesn't it? What kind of problem gets so bad that the only solution is to call in a feline air force?
Well, the immediate problem was, basically, a plague. Not a plague of locusts or frogs, but of rats.
I mean, these remote communities were just being completely overrun. Rats were everywhere, and they were devouring the rice crops, the very food supply that people depended on. So, in desperation, they sent out a call for help. And this bizarre mission was the answer they got.
Which, of course, brings up the next obvious question. Don't most villages have cats? You know, the natural predators that are supposed to keep the rodent population in check? So where were they? Why did the local cat population suddenly just disappear, letting the rats completely take over?
And this is where the story goes from just being strange to being absolutely incredible. Because the answer isn't in what was happening in that village. The answer starts years earlier, with a global health campaign that had nothing but good intentions. The whole thing was kicked off by the World Health Organization. See, back in the 1950s, they started this massive campaign to wipe out malaria-carrying mosquitoes using a powerful insecticide called DDT. It was seen as a miracle chemical at the time. Nobody had any idea they were about to tip over a whole series of ecological dominoes.
Okay, so this is the whole crazy chain reaction. It started with the DDT spray. That didn't just kill the mosquitoes, it also killed off a species of wasp. Well, those wasps used to eat caterpillars. So without the wasps, the caterpillar population exploded. And guess what the caterpillars ate? The thatched roofs of the villagers' homes. So then the roofs started collapsing. At the same time, the local cats started dying off, poisoned by the DDT after either licking it off their own fur or eating lizards that had been contaminated. And with the cats gone, you guessed it, the rat population went through the roof. It's just this perfect, unbelievable cascade of unintended consequences that led straight to Operation Cat Drop.
Now, you might have heard different versions of this story, because over the years it's gotten a little exaggerated. Some accounts claim there were 14,000 cats dropped. But if you go back to the original newspaper reports from 1960, they're really clear. The initial request was for about 30 cats, and in the end, 23 made the trip.
And it turns out that parachuting cats in wasn't always a perfect solution. In another similar operation, 5 of the cats were apparently killed by what were described as large and aggressive rats. And in a different mission, 2 of the feline agents went AWOL almost as soon as they landed. The army even joked that if they were ever found, they'd face a cat marshal and be sentenced to 14 days locked up on a ratless diet. So what is the big takeaway from this completely wild story? Well, it's a perfect, if a little eccentric, lesson in something called systems thinking.
Systems thinking is really all about seeing the connections. It's this core idea that you can't just change one little part of a complex system, like an ecosystem, without causing ripples that affect everything else. The wasps, the caterpillars, the roofs, the cats, the rats, they were all part of one big, interconnected system.
It's like these engineers, Ostrom and Murray, put it. You can't just focus on solving one problem in a complex system. You absolutely have to step back and look at the system as a whole. If you don't, you just risk creating a bunch of new problems somewhere else down the line.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a quirky story from the 60s, but what's that got to do with today? Well, it turns out this same failure to see the whole system is causing brand new problems in that exact same part of the world right now.
See, the new threat isn't the same old malaria from back then. It's a completely new strain, one that's carried by macaque monkeys, and it's quickly becoming a huge public health crisis in Malaysia.
And we are not talking about a minor problem here. This monkey malaria now accounts for a staggering 69% of all malaria infections in the country. It's the dominant strain by far.
And when you look at the cause, well, it's a story that sounds tragically familiar. It starts with human intervention. In this case, deforestation for things like farming. This shrinks the monkey's natural habitat, which forces them into closer and closer contact with human populations. And as that happens, the risk of the disease they carry jumping to humans goes way up. Once again, a narrow solution to one problem has created a brand new, unintended crisis.
Which brings us to the final, crucial question. Operation Cat Drop is so much more than just a funny historical anecdote. It's a warning. It really forces us to ask, in all of our big efforts to solve complex problems today, everything from climate change to public health, are we truly seeing the whole system, or are we just setting up the next generation's version of a cat drop?